The sun dipped beneath Willow Creek's horizon, painting the Iowa sky with streaks of fire and fading violet. Yet for 16-year-old Emily Carter, beauty dissolved into terror. Her arms strained, bound by coarse rope to the bark of an old oak tree. The rope cut her wrists raw as the laughter of Dylan Price and his friends echoed in the twilight. The quarterback's mocking voice stung sharper than the wind. "Farm girl, nobody cares about you." Amber Collins smirked at Emily's torn overalls, her cruel whispers a chorus to Dylan's arrogance. Hunter Reeves, uneasy but obedient, shoved dirt at her shoes, sneering under his breath. The storm rolled closer, lightning flickering across the fields. Emily's heart raced, not from the storm, but from the growing certainty that no one would come. Emily Carter had grown up in the rhythms of farmland, milking cows at dawn, repairing fences, and watching fireflies from her porch. But school hallways turned her quiet spirit into a target. Whispers of hillbilly and worthless farm rat trailed her steps. Dylan, the golden boy of Willow Creek High, led the charge, his charm twisted into a weapon. Amber fueled his cruelty, whispering venom disguised as laughter. Even teachers turned blind eyes when Emily lowered her head, clutching books like a shield. Now, with her wrists bound to the oak, she wondered if her silence had invited this fate. The oak had once been her sanctuary, its branches shading her during long afternoons of reading. Tonight, it became her prison. The thunder growled low, and fear crept through her veins. Emily realized that cruelty in the hallways was nothing compared to being abandoned under a storm.
The air thickened with the smell of cut grass and oncoming rain. Dylan's face glowed smug in the dim firelight as he leaned close, spitting venom. Let's see how long it takes for anyone to notice the freak tied to a tree. Amber's laughter rang like glass shattering. She tugged at Emily's braid and whispered, "Poor farm girl, maybe the cows will rescue you." Hunter Reeves shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "This is going too far." But Dylan silenced him with a glare. Their footsteps faded into the darkness, leaving Emily alone. The rope dug deeper as she twisted, each tug only slicing her wrists more. The storm broke, raindrops cold against her face. A flash of lightning revealed the deserted field, endless rows of corn swaying like witnesses. Emily shuddered, her breath shallow. Mocked, humiliated, and left to the night, her fear now carved itself into despair. As rain pattered harder, Emily pressed her cheek against the rough bark, her breath fogging in short bursts. She thought of her parents, hard-working and weary, tending crops and livestock without knowing their daughter was suffering yards away. Shame burned alongside fear. Dylan's laughter echoed in memory, louder than the storm. "Nobody wants you, Emily." Her chest tightened. She felt invisible in life, and now, forgotten in the night. But deep in her pocket pressed something small yet powerful, a battered flip phone she had hidden even from her parents. She'd bought it with chore money, her lifeline against the isolation of farm and school. Her wrists trembled, raw and slippery from the rain, but determination grew. She would not let Dylan's cruelty write her ending. Hope sparked as her fingertips brushed against the phone, though each second risked dropping it into the mud below.
Emily's hand shook as she pulled the phone free. Mud streaked her sleeve, water seeped into the keys, but she clutched it like salvation. She remembered the number saved in memory, a number tied not to a parent or friend, but to her secret, her husband, Cole Matthews. 2 years older, broad-shouldered and steady, he was no ordinary man. He was Delta Force, trained for storms fiercer than this. Few in town even knew he existed. To them, Emily was only the fragile farm girl, but Cole had vowed once to protect her from everything. Her pulse hammered as she dialed. Rain hissed on the cornfields, thunder rolled, and then the line clicked. His voice, low and commanding, steadied her spinning world. For the first time that night, Emily believed she might survive. Hope pulsed, fragile but fierce against the dark silence of Willow Creek. On the other end, Cole's voice hardened into steel as Emily gasped out her location. He was thousands of miles away, but already in motion. In seconds, the background erupted with the clipped urgency of orders, boots hitting floors and engines roaring to life. Cole's Delta brothers didn't question him. If Cole said wife in danger, it became their mission. A Ford F-150 pickup truck roared to life, headlights slicing through the rain as they sped toward Willow Creek. Emily clung to his voice as the phone pressed to her ear. She heard him whisper, "Stay with me." She felt the storm rage, but something stronger was coming. Dylan Price thought his cruelty would go unnoticed. He had no idea the storm heading back to Willow Creek was not thunder, it was a soldier, trained for war, fueled by love. Emily's fear turned into trembling anticipation.
Tied against the oak, Emily's mind wandered to when she first met Cole Matthews. 14, shy, and hiding behind her father's worn flannel shirt, she had stumbled upon him at the county fair. He was older, already in uniform, but he spoke gently to her about fireflies and country music. For the first time, she felt seen. They married in a secret chapel just across state lines, hidden from her parents, hidden from the town that would never understand. Now, that memory flared against the storm. She wasn't just Emily Carter, the farm girl, anymore. She was Emily Carter Matthews, the wife of a man who never broke a promise. The ropes still cut deep, but each breath steadied her heart. If Cole said he was coming, he was coming. For the first time all evening, she closed her eyes and believed in rescue. Lightning tore the night sky open, illuminating the lonely field and Emily's pale face. Rain soaked her hair, plastering golden strands against her cheeks. Every gust of wind reminded her of Dylan's sneer, "Nobody's coming for you." Yet the steady hum of the phone in her palm proved otherwise. Cole's voice broke through again, calm but edged with fury. "I'm 20 minutes out." She whispered nothing, only breathed relief. The storm raged louder, echoing the storm rising in Cole's chest. Emily knew Dylan and Amber believed their prank would vanish into silence by morning. Instead, thunder carried a warning. The quiet farm girl wasn't alone. A reckoning was rolling across state lines in the form of a Ford F-150, slicing through rain, its headlights locked on Willow Creek. Every rumble in the sky became a promise. The torment would not end the way Dylan expected. Cole Matthews sat in the front seat, jaw clenched, blue eyes cold fire under the brim of his cap. The storm blurred highways into rivers, but his hands never wavered on the wheel. Behind him sat his Delta brothers, silent and steady, their faces unreadable but ready. They had fought warlords and insurgents, yet this night felt different. This was personal. Emily's voice still rang in his ear, shaky but unbroken. Every word fueled his fury, but also his resolve. "They tied her to a tree," he repeated in his head, the phrase clawing at his sanity. No battlefield had ever filled him with such rage. The oak tree awaited, a prison for the girl he loved. But to Cole, it was about to become a battlefield. And the bullies who thought themselves untouchable were about to face the kind of justice only Delta could deliver. Emily's flip phone screen flickered weakly, battery nearly gone. Each blink of light felt like a countdown to darkness. Her fingers trembled as she pressed it tighter against her ear, refusing to let go of Cole's voice. Lightning crackled again, briefly illuminating the endless rows of corn like a ghostly army standing at attention. She whispered a shaky prayer into the storm. She wasn't praying for herself anymore. She prayed Cole would arrive safely, prayed the storm would not stop him, prayed Dylan and his friends would realize cruelty had consequences. The phone dimmed again. Emily braced for the silence of a dead battery when headlights slashed across the bend in the road. Tires splashed through mud, and for the first time all night, Emily felt the rope on her wrists loosen, not from her own struggle, but from the promise of rescue.
The headlights swept over the oak tree, casting Emily's soaked figure in a flash of white light. Cole Matthews was out of the Ford F-150 before the wheels stopped turning, his boots sinking into the mud. His knife glinted once, slicing the rope that had carved into her wrists. Emily collapsed forward, burned him like seeing his wife tied helpless under a storm. Cole wrapped her in his jacket, his jaw tight with rage. They thought this was a game, he muttered to himself, scanning the field. But this wasn't over. He had promised Emily safety, and Delta Force didn't leave missions unfinished. Tonight, Dylan Price and his crew were about to meet their reckoning. Not far from the oak tree, flames crackled in a drunken bonfire, where Dylan, Amber, and Hunter laughed with cans of cheap beer. Dylan bragged loudly, smirk carved across his face. Farm girl's probably crying herself to sleep on the dirt by now. Amber leaned into him, her polished nails glittering as she snickered. Nobody cares about her, Dylan. She's invisible. Hunter chuckled nervously, though his eyes kept darting toward the storm. Yet the group didn't notice when the rain eased for a moment, or the way headlights cut across the distant fields. The laughter echoed hollow, shallow, unknowing. Their cruelty had bound Emily to humiliation, but what they didn't realize was that humiliation always echoed back. The flames cast shadows long and thin, and through those shadows, retribution was moving silently closer, wearing boots hardened in foreign deserts and eyes trained for vengeance.
The bonfire hissed as rain spattered its embers, but the real chill came when Cole Matthews stepped from the darkness. He walked slowly, deliberately, his frame cutting through smoke and flame. Dylan's laughter faltered, Amber froze mid-smirk, and Hunter dropped his beer can into the mud. No words at first, only silence, heavy and suffocating, as Cole's Delta brothers fanned out behind him. Their presence was enough to still every mocking breath. Dylan tried to muster bravado. "Who the hell are you?" His voice cracked against the storm. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. His gaze, sharp as steel, locked on Dylan like a sighted weapon. Every second stretched, dragging their arrogance into fear. The soldier who had crossed oceans for strangers was here for his wife, and these bullies had just turned a schoolyard prank into the biggest mistake of their lives. Cole stepped closer, boots crunching wet dirt as the firelight flickered over his face. His voice finally broke the silence, low but commanding. "You tied my wife to a tree?" Dylan stumbled back, confusion painted over his arrogance. Amber's laughter snapped into a nervous whimper. Hunter's shoulders sagged as his eyes darted to the ground. Cole's men closed the circle around the fire, 6 shadows sealing every exit. The bullies had mocked Emily as weak, invisible, unworthy. Now their sneers crumbled under the weight of men who had dismantled warlords. Dylan puffed his chest once more, but Cole's hand shot out, gripping his wrist and twisting until Dylan yelped. It wasn't pain, it was a demonstration. "You should be scared," Cole said softly, almost like a whisper. The bonfire snapped, sparks rising into the night. For the first time, Dylan Price truly understood fear.
Amber's lip trembled, her mocking cruelty dissolving under Cole's silent stare. Hunter, once nervous, now muttered quick apologies, his voice shaking. Dylan, though trying to mask it, stumbled backward, tripping into the mud as the Delta soldiers loomed closer. "Apologize to her," Cole commanded, voice cold. "Mean it, or remember this night every time you close your eyes." Dylan's mouth twisted, but he sputtered, "I'm sorry." The words, once foreign to him, scraped from his throat like broken glass. Amber followed, whispering apologies, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Emily's humiliation had become theirs, her quiet dignity now magnified by the soldier who stood for her. Cole didn't smile, he didn't celebrate, he simply let the silence linger, forcing their shame to settle in their bones. Emily had once been the one mocked. Tonight, it was Dylan's smirk that had been shattered forever. The confrontation ended not with fists, but with silence heavier than violence. Cole turned from the broken trio, leaving them in their own ash and shame. He returned to the truck, lifting Emily gently into the back seat. She clung to his jacket, trembling, but for the first time that night her breathing slowed. The Ford F-150 cut through rain-slicked roads, headlights carving tunnels of safety in the storm. Beside her sat one of Cole's men, who wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and offered a steady nod of reassurance. Emily realized she wasn't just married to a soldier, she was part of a brotherhood that protected its own. She stared at the storm flashing across the horizon. Dylan Price might have left her tied to a tree, but Cole Matthews had returned her strength, rope by rope, humiliation by humiliation.
By sunrise, Willow Creek buzzed with whispers. Neighbors noticed Dylan's pale face and Amber's sudden silence at the cafe. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. "She's married to a soldier," someone murmured. "Not just a soldier, Delta Force," another corrected. Emily walked through school that morning, wrists bandaged but her chin lifted higher than ever. Dylan avoided her gaze, his swagger shriveled. Teachers, once blind to the bullying, whispered now too, realizing the farm girl they ignored had someone who could command silence from warlords and bullies alike. Yet beneath the whispers lurked envy, resentment, and fear. Emily felt their stares, but for the first time she wasn't crushed beneath them. She carried Cole's promise like armor. The oak tree had been a stage for her torment, but now it was the story everyone wanted to tell. The farm girl was no longer invisible. Dylan's pride, however, refused to die quietly. Humiliation burned him hotter than fire, and Amber fed his fury. "She made us a laughingstock," she hissed. Hunter begged them to stop, but Dylan's glare silenced him. By the weekend, Dylan was plotting revenge, his ego unable to withstand the shift in Willow Creek's whispers. He called friends, whispered threats, and even considered reporting Cole to the authorities for intimidation. But fear and jealousy made him sloppy. Every rumor Dylan planted turned into proof of his cruelty. Emily overheard classmates say, "If Dylan's still talking, maybe he hasn't learned his lesson." The more Dylan fumed, the more Emily grew. She was no longer defined by rope or laughter. Every rumor became a rehook, pulling the town's attention back to the girl who once hit her face. Emily Carter was stepping into a strength she never knew.
It was late afternoon when Dylan's rage boiled into confrontation. He stormed up the dirt road to the Carter farm, Amber trailing behind like a shadow. Emily stood on the porch, her father watching from the window inside, but before Dylan could spew his threats, the rumble of an engine drowned him out. The Ford F-150 turned the corner, tires crunching gravel. Cole Matthews stepped out, his silhouette framed by the sinking sun. Dylan froze. He hadn't expected to see him again. Cole's eyes didn't flare with rage this time. They held steady disappointment. Without a word, Dylan backed away, his bravado collapsing. The farm that once felt vulnerable now stood guarded, not just by fences and crops, but by the presence of a soldier who had turned humiliation into dignity. Emily didn't need to speak. The silence of her porch told the whole story. The days that followed brought no more ropes, no more laughter, only silence whenever Emily walked through town. Dylan's pride had been broken twice, Amber's sneer wiped clean, Hunter reduced to shadows of regret. Yet the real confrontation happened not in public, but in Emily's heart. She stood once more under the oak tree, her wrists healed but her spirit still scarred. Cole stood beside her, silent, his presence steady as the tree itself. She pressed her palm to the bark, feeling its rough strength. "They tried to bind me here," she whispered in her mind, "but they only showed me how strong I can stand." Cole's hand brushed her shoulder, unspoken promise steady in his silence. The storm had passed, but Emily understood the lesson. Humiliation could only chain her if she allowed it. And tonight, the oak stood taller than ever.
Though Dylan kept his distance, fear festered like an open wound. Gossip swirled through Willow Creek, whispers of how a Delta Force husband had humiliated the town's golden boy. Dylan's smirk was gone, but his anger remained, reshaping into bitterness. Meanwhile, Emily's steps grew lighter. She walked through hallways where she'd once kept her head down, now carrying herself with quiet pride. Yet even as she stood stronger, she felt the eyes of resentment press him on her back. Parents whispered at PTA meetings, muttering about farm kids marrying soldiers. Some called her lucky, others foolish. The confrontation at the oak tree had silenced her bullies. But silence has a way of breeding darker storms. For every step forward, she knew another test was coming. And when it arrived, Emily Carter would need more than Cole's presence. She'd need her own courage to face it. The church basement buzzed one Thursday night as townsfolk gathered for a community meeting. At first, it was about roads and harvest schedules. But soon, Dylan's father, a man with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, shifted the talk. "We can't have outsiders threatening our kids," he barked, stirring the crowd. He called Cole a menace, painted Emily as a manipulator who had hidden her marriage like a scandal. Gasps echoed, murmurs spreading. For the first time, Emily's character, not just her silence, was under attack. Some defended her, remembering Dylan's cruelty, but many feared the power Cole represented. Emily sat quietly in the back, her heart pounding, realizing that humiliation could come in new forms, dressed as adult judgment and gossip. That night, the town re-hooked itself into her life, pulling her into a battle of reputation she never asked for, but could no longer avoid.
Cole listened as Emily recounted the meeting, his jaw tightening. He had fought terrorists, but nothing unnerved him like seeing his wife crushed by whispers. Emily, though, resisted pity. "They'll always doubt me if I hide," she thought. Still, seeds of fear lodged in her chest. What if the town never stopped seeing her as the farm girl who married a soldier in secret? What if Cole's presence only amplified their judgment? That night, under the flicker of the kitchen lamp, she wrote in her notebook, "They can't take my truth, but they'll try to twist it." The oak tree had once been her prison, but now the real knots were in the minds of those around her. As thunder rolled outside, Emily knew the storm wasn't Dylan anymore. It was the town itself, and this time, she would face it with her own voice. Desperation drove Dylan to recklessness. Humiliated, ignored by his peers, even abandoned by Amber, he schemed one final attempt to reclaim power. Late one evening, he cornered Emily behind the school gym, his eyes dark with rage. "You think you're untouchable now?" he hissed. Emily's heart hammered, but before she could reply, the headlights of Cole's Ford F-150 cut across the lot. Dylan froze, his bravado melting under the soldier's shadow. Cole didn't touch him. He didn't need to. His voice alone carried finality. "This ends here." Dylan stumbled backward, his face pale as if staring into judgment itself. It wasn't violence that ended him. It was the realization that no one feared him anymore. Emily, standing tall beside her husband, knew this was the last time Dylan Price's cruelty would ever define her story. The rope at the oak tree was gone for good.
After Dylan's collapse into irrelevance, a hush settled over Willow Creek. For the first time, Emily wasn't whispered about as a victim, but as someone who had endured, who had survived humiliation and turned it into dignity. Teachers treated her differently. Classmates stepped aside, and even the cruelest neighbors softened their tones. But Emily didn't need their approval anymore. She found herself smiling quietly at the oak tree each morning, no longer haunted by its bark, but strengthened by it. Cole's leave was ending soon. He would return to his unit. That thought ached, yet Emily realized something profound. She no longer feared being alone. The farm girl who once tied her identity to invisibility had learned to carry strength in her own skin. Her husband's rescue lit the fire, but it was her spirit that now carried the flame. Cole's duffel bag sat by the farmhouse door, heavy with uniforms and weighty silence. Emily watched him prepare, the storm of goodbyes pressing against her chest. He'd been her rescuer, her shield, her anchor, but now she had to be her own. At the dinner table, her parents, unaware of the full truth, exchanged cautious glances, sensing the shift in their daughter. Emily's secret marriage was no longer just a private bond, it had become a public legacy. When Cole left at dawn, Emily stood tall on the porch, no tears falling. She whispered only in her heart, "I can stand now, even when you're gone." The oak tree swayed in the morning light, its scarred bark a reminder of both cruelty and triumph. Emily had once been tied down, but now she was free, even if the world wasn't ready to admit it. Cole's absence tested Emily's newfound strength. Dylan had vanished from town gossip, but whispers lingered in subtler forms. Raised eyebrows in the grocery store, murmurs in church pews. Some neighbors still doubted her, claiming Cole's presence had been too intimidating. Emily, however, refused to bow to suspicion. She began tutoring younger students after school, guiding them in reading beneath that same oak tree. Slowly, children gathered, their laughter and curiosity pushing out shadows of mockery. What was once a place of cruelty became a classroom of hope. Emily realized strength wasn't just silence or endurance, it was using scars as lessons for others. Each evening, as the wind rustled through the fields, she whispered to herself, "They tied me to humiliate me, but all they did was plant my roots deeper." By autumn, change rippled across Willow Creek. Parents who once whispered began sending their children to Emily's after-school gatherings. Farmers dropped by with pies, muttering apologies disguised as kindness. Even the church ladies who had scoffed at her marriage now smiled faintly in her direction. It wasn't dramatic, no headlines, no speeches, but little by little, respect grew where there had been scorn. Emily had become something the town hadn't expected, a quiet leader. Cole's name carried weight, yes, but her own actions carried permanence. Willow Creek had once mocked her hunger, tied her to a tree, and doubted her worth. Now they leaned on her resilience as proof that dignity doesn't need applause. It only needs to be lived. And Emily Carter lived it every single day, planting hope in the same soil where shame once thrived.
Months later, the rumble of the Ford F-150 once again shook the dirt road leading to the Carter farm. Emily's heart leapt as Cole stepped out, older in his eyes but steadier in his smile. He found her at the oak tree, surrounded by children laughing in the afternoon sun. For a moment, Cole simply watched, pride swelling. This wasn't the timid girl he had once rescued. This was a woman who had turned humiliation into legacy. Emily rose to greet him, her hands steady, her voice clear. Together, they stood beneath the tree that had once symbolized cruelty, but now radiated resilience. Cole had returned from foreign battles, but Emily had fought the deeper war at home. And in her strength, he saw the greatest victory of all. On a crisp Sunday morning, Willow Creek gathered for a fall festival beneath the wide branches of the oak tree. Stalls lined the fields, children played, and the townsfolk finally stood side by side without whispers of judgment. Emily, once tied and mocked, now welcomed them with grace, her scars invisible but powerful. The oak's bark still bore faint grooves of rope, but instead of shame, they stood as proof of survival. Cole stood at her side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, no longer her savior, but her partner. Together, they watched as neighbors who had doubted her now shared laughter and gratitude. Emily Carter was no longer the quiet farm girl, no longer the victim of cruelty. She had become the heart of her community, her story rooted forever in the oak tree that once tried to break her.